Good afternoon. I want to thank everyone for attending today's Nonprofit Resource Hub webinar, Are You in the Dark About Your Financial Situation? And featuring Genevieve Sapp and Nicole Frisina from Your Part-Time Controller. My name is Ellie Hume, and I am the New York Director for Your Part-Time Controller. We are a proud associate member of the Nonprofit Resource Hub, or NRH for short. So, who is the Nonprofit Resource Hub? Well, NRH is a trade association whose mission is to serve, be a resource to, educate, and connect its members to the nonprofit community. At the same time, NRH serves the nonprofit sector as a bridge connecting nonprofit organizations to each other and to helpful resources. And that's part of what we're doing here today. So, what do we do for nonprofits, you ask? Well, we provide nonprofits with resources to help their organizations grow and thrive. We share a directory of our associate members. These are vetted, trusted providers and advisors who deliver quality products, services, and education to the sector. And we are continuously adding new associate members. NRH also hosts networking sessions and events like this one to foster opportunities for collaboration, both with other nonprofit organizations and with experts serving the sector. We provide a continuous flow of information and insights to keep nonprofits informed about key issues affecting the sector and about helpful resources. We offer expert advice and consultation to help organizations effectively further their missions. And NRH serves as a one-stop resource hub for nonprofits, providing a single access point for information and resources. We encourage each of the nonprofits joining us for today's webinar to also join NRH as a nonprofit partner. There is no cost for nonprofits to join as our partners. And there are significant benefits, including having your logo and mission added to our website with a link to your website, adding your events to our calendar, and maximizing your organization's ability to benefit from the opportunities and resources that NRH offers. Nonprofit Resource Hub itself is a nonprofit. NRH's 5 founding members are represented on its board of directors. These 5 founding members are Serini and Associates Accountants, Nonprofit Sector Strategies, the Sertelman Ballin Law Firm, Triumph International Consultants, and Vanguard Insurance Agency. Before we turn it over to our partners, I want to thank our associate members for their vital support in everything that we do. Information about each member can be found on our website. As I mentioned, these members go through a vetting process to ensure they will be great resources to our nonprofit partners. We hope you will consider working with them when and if the need arises for your organization. And without further ado, I'll hand it over to Genevieve and Nicole for our great topic today. Take it away, ladies.
Thank you, Ellie, for the introduction. And we're going to get started here. Are you in the dark about your financial situation? Shining a light on the financial information you need for decision making. My name is Nicole Frisina, and along with Genevieve Sapp, we will be your guides on the path into the light about your organization's finances today. Genevieve and I are managers in YPTC's New York office. We provide direction and oversight in support of direct client service with not-for-profit organizations, for-profit companies, and government agencies and authorities in the greater New York area. Let's get started by telling you a little bit about YPTC. We are a professional services firm with more than 25 years of nonprofit experience. We specialize in nonprofit financial management. Our services include accounting, reporting, data visualization, and best practices. We have over 800 clients currently located in 36 states throughout the country, including the District of Columbia. Our New York City office is centrally located in Herald Square. However, we typically would work in our clients' offices. Due to current events, we are working remotely and hope to return to in-person work when it is safe to do so. Now that you know a little bit about us, we would like to learn a little bit about all of you joining us today. We would like to do a quick poll to find out who we have with us today. Great, so let's see, we have a good mix of participants today. About 50% of you are nonprofit executive leaders. There's about 13% staff and about 33% other. Really great mix. So during today's webinar, you're going to learn about 3 key pieces of financial information that should matter most to nonprofit management teams and boards, and some best practices for presenting financial information for informed business decisions. I'm going to now turn it over to Genevieve to discuss our key pieces of financial information.
Thank you, Nicole. Let's start off imagining we are participating in a virtual board meeting and it's time for the finance report. If you are part of the executive team or management staff, are you nervous to present your report to your board? Is it because all of you can really tell them is that you have X dollars in the bank account and it feels like you could use more resources? You don't know why or how much, just that you don't know that you cannot pay all the bills. If you are a board member, are you unclear what exactly is the presenter is saying, what that looks like, what they want, what they need, and why they need it? The financial information that nonprofit management teams and boards receive should answer 3 questions. How much cash do we have? How are we doing in comparison to? What's our financial story? Let's discuss each of these and best practices for presenting the information. Our first question is, how much cash do we have? I'm sure many of you are familiar with the phrase, cash is king or cash is queen. And that is absolutely true. If there is no money, there is no mission. But what are we speaking about goes beyond checking your bank account balance. Receiving information about your organization's liquidity is imperative for decision making. This includes an assessment of the liquidity needs over different time horizons, short-term, mid-term, long-term. We will look at an example of each shortly. But before you can start to assess liquidity, your organization should have a liquidity policy. This is necessary to set the parameters and principles you need to follow. A liquidity policy will reflect number of days of cash on hand to operating expenses the organization strives to maintain, how cash in excess of daily requirements is invested, other resources available for unanticipated needs, and it should align with ASU 2016-14 guidance on quantitative and qualitative disclosures. I have an example a little later in the presentation of short-term, mid-term, and long-term. So when we want to assess liquidity, we have to understand what our liquid or financial assets are. In addition to unencumbered cash, financial assets also include receivables that are due within 12 months and marketable securities that can easily be converted to cash and have maturities under 12 months. Financial assets do not include prepaid expenses, inventory, or fixed assets. So as you can see in this example, all the assets are lined up as one big group of assets. This example does not give us more details of current versus non-current. We're unable to determine if assets can be liquidated in 12 months, or if we have to push it to the next 12 months. To make this determination, it is important to classify or group assets into current and non-current categories. Also, using accrual basis accounting is key. Accounts receivable reports provide the aging details needed to assist in this determination. In this example, this financial presentation to the end user is not easy to identify the liquid or financial assets of this organization. In comparison, the classified presentation on the left will help us determine what are the financial assets. Instead of $211,400 in total cash, the current and liquid cash is $86,401. Only $260,000 of the $500,000 in the contributions receivable are current. As we look at the other assets, keep in mind that cash received with donor-imposed restrictions or that is board designated that limits the use to long-term purposes should not be classified with cash available for current use. In this example, we see that the current assets now can be easily identified with cash, accounts receivable, contributions receivable, and prepaid expenses, compared to our initial example of grouping all your assets together. Some financial assets may still be unavailable, such as those that have external limits imposed by donors, vendors, or credits, or internal limits imposed by by board decisions. Any contributions receivable restricted by donors, any cash that is not available due to bank covenants. For example, your required minimum cash balance in your payroll account. Boards have the authority to reclassify board designated assets. Let me say that one more time. Boards have the authority to reclassify board designated assets. So there could be some strategic planning opportunities here. Cash projections can be used to forecast cash receipts and disbursements. For the purpose of our next examples, let's define short-term, mid-term, and long-term cash projections. For the short term, this usually covers periods of 2 to 6 months, but can as well be as short as weekly or daily. Midterm will be defined as periods that cover a 1-year period. And long-term projects amounts over multiple years. So now that we have our definitions of short-term, mid-term, and long-term, let's go ahead and get into our first example of short-term examples. We utilize cash projections to forecast cash receipts and disbursements. Short-term forecasts usually cover, as we mentioned one slide previously, short-term covers a time period of 60 to 120 days, but can be as short as weekly or even daily. For most nonprofits, the single largest expenditure will be payroll and personnel-related costs. This information becomes even more of a necessity when cash flows are uncertain. In this example, we are showing that we have our ending cash balance, but within that ending cash balance, we have some restricted cash that we specifically outline. We also showing that we have cash reserves, required by the bank, which makes up our available cash balance. And for a board member, the board member wants to know what is our line of credit balance and what is the line of credit availability. That is very important when you are doing your weekly cash flow projections. In summary, take into consideration the liquidity issues we just discussed, external limits posed by donors and creditors, amounts available through the line of credit. This is a rolling forecast example. It's used to help forecast an organization's performance and ending cash balance. It combines actual and forecast amounts for comparison against the annual budget and usually covers rolling 12-month time period. By incorporating cash flow information, it goes beyond just projecting net income. It provides management an opportunity to plan how to address shortfalls or when to set aside funds for the future. The executive director and board members I work with frequently tell me it's their favorite report. For a more summarized view, we often provide this information as a data visualization on a dashboard. More to come on that a little bit later. Part of the process with creating a rolling forecast on a monthly basis is to adjust assumptions for the rest of the year based on what we now know. We do this by meeting with program, development, and management staff, which is a great exercise because it promotes collaboration between all departments. No one man is an island. They need support. This rolling forecast is showing us that although we are projected to have sufficient cash through March, we are going to need to address our liquidity needs come spring and then again in the fall. Maybe we will need to obtain a line of credit, which would be more difficult come April when we need the cash. This shows us we need to get the umbrella now before it starts raining. And also in this example, we see on to the far right, our budget total and is lined up right next to the forecast. So you can easily see line by line where you are hitting your budget or where you're going over based on your forecast. And in the middle where we see cash flow adjustments, you get to see your inflows and outflows. And at the very end of your cash flow forecast, you get to see your beginning cash and your ending cash for every period. These are vital points for projecting your cash forecast. Our long-term example, AKA the big picture, projects income and expense amounts over multiple years. As you can see in this example, FY21 is going to end with a net deficiency of negative $63,518. However, this organization is projecting that when COVID is over, that the new normal will be increased there. Once COVID is over, the increase of revenue will come back again through tuition, through school contracts, through rental incomes. And the offset to that is the increase of expenses. So in FY21, you had a net deficiency. However, going forward, they are forecasting a net surplus. I also want to tell you that this presentation does not make cash adjustments. The focus on operating activity, however, the plan here is to generate surpluses, which will lead to building cash reserves. This is a great option to provide boards the big picture. Nicole is now going to address our second question.
Our second key piece of financial information relates to comparisons. All of these provide the financial information that boards need to monitor performance. Some of the questions we should be asking ourselves are, how are the actuals doing in comparison to budgets? How do we compare to the same period as in prior years? And how do we compare to peers within our industry? Let's share some examples on how to present this comparative information and explain why they're important for organizations to review. A budget is a roadmap. It is a financial interpretation of the operating plan. Budgets can be in various forms. There can be operating budgets, capital budgets, project budgets, and cash forecasts. Budget to actual reporting helps monitor whether you're on course and where the variances are. This tool drives decision-making. Now, this example may be too busy for some of you, and that's okay. Reports should be customized. This client wanted to see comparisons to the year-to-date budget and the annual budget and the prior year to date. Next is an example of budget to actual at a programmatic and functional level. Let's look at this example. Something to point out, this is a top-level report that quickly provides the board the information it needs to know. The total variance was an unfavorable 3%. Notice how the variance column is defined so that the reader understands which is favorable versus unfavorable. Program heads might receive their own budget to actual reports. When looking at this report, you can see that the total personnel is under budget by about $25,000. But then you can also see their operating expenses are also under budget by about $60,000. Majority of that drive is in their professional fees column. They saved a little bit of money there. When presenting this, explanations should provide about any major variances, why they may have occurred, and if any course corrections are necessary. Financial reports showing comparisons to previous are useful. However, charts and graphs are a better way to illustrate performance trends over time. In this first example, we're reviewing how many homeless were served by month over the past 3 years. We can see that in fiscal year 1, it trended higher in most of the months as compared to the other fiscal years. In the second example, we can see how many months of expenses are on hand over the past 5 years. It's usually recommended to have a benchmark of 3 to 6 months. And in this particular example, it was maintained or exceeded each year. And in this last example is a bar graph showing the percentage of revenue between contributed income, special event, and earned income over the past 5 years. You can see special event income increased to nearly 60% in year 5, as well as there is an upward trend for earned income over the years, but a downward trend for contributed. Peer analysis is a great way to help boards see how your organization compares against other similar organizations. Some things to take into consideration when selecting your peers are budget size, mission, staff size, and region or location. So where can we get this financial information on our peers? It's readily available from an organization's Form 990. These are public documents and are available on guidestar.org. In this example, it shows a few key metrics this organization was interested in comparing their activities with peer organizations. This organization's number of employees and revenue are comparative to the other nonprofit organizations. We can see that their net assets without donor restrictions are one of the lowest out of the other 5 nonprofits. We can also see they have the highest percentage in government grants, which is most likely feeding this. If I were looking at this, I would be asking myself, are there other funding sources we can obtain outside of government grants? And now back to Genevieve for our third key piece of financial information.
This brings us to our third question. What's the financial story? The financial story should consist of good news and bad news at a high level. There are several ways that we present this financial story. The first one is through our executive summary. Then we move into the month-end memo. Another way to present the financial story is through financial dashboards. And last is dynamic reporting. In the financial story, you may want to make sure we follow these key items. We do want to keep it simple. We do want to focus on the big picture. Do analyze things that can be controlled. Do report on operating targets and whether they will be reached. And we would like to avoid creating overly complex visuals, getting stuck in the weeds, focusing on immaterial line items, and reporting on meaningless performance indicators. Here are examples of presenting information on the financial story. One way we might communicate financial information is through an executive summary using a few sentences. On our month-end memo, our current cash balance is $508,000, though much of this balance is restricted revenue received from Funder A and Funder B. Lack of unrestricted cash remains a challenge, and we are currently using restricted cash for general purposes. And again, sometimes it may be bad news. However, it is important to know the story so action can be taken to remedy the situation. Here's another example of an executive summary. This will hopefully lead to action items. We are struggling to cover the indirect costs of the government contracts we agreed to accept. Many of the contracts carry reimbursement rates that are lower than our actual cost. Many programs cannot cover direct costs as they do not have any other funding source. Because we have no operating reserves, we may remain solvent mainly due to large contributions from a small number of funders. Maybe the contracts need to be renegotiated or cuts have to be made. Expanding or diversifying the donor base may help. But the lesson stands out most to me is the need to build reserves, budgeting for surplus, but that's a discussion or webinar for another time. A month-end memo has an overall summary and then lists highlights for each report. When we present this with a full set of financial statements to provide a complete financial information package, we have we start with our summary statement. Unrestricted fundraising revenue has continued to fall short of budgeted expectations, which is driving the projected $17,000 shortfall in total cash by fiscal year end. Our next section we will discuss is the statements of financial position, also known as balance sheet. The key item that we want to talk about in this one, remember, cash is king or queen. We want to talk about some key items that is driving our cash up or down, and if we're expecting anything in the future. Our next section in the memo, the month-end memo, is statements of activities, also known as profit and loss or income statement. We'll discuss our year-to-date net income, any key indicators of what's going on in that section. We want to talk about if we have received any grants, if we have released any restrictions at this point. And we also want to identify some key metrics of if our expenses are going up or down by a significant amount of money. As we go beyond reports and statements, financial dashboards are a succinct way of telling the story. This financial dashboard was created in Excel, and it's showcasing 3 items that the board can easily digest quickly. We talk about the net income. Is it being driven by the revenue or the expenses when we compare year to date to the prior year to date? The next section talks about the functional expenses. What's the allocation of our functional expenses? Programs, admin, and fundraising. Most nonprofits know that the functional expense allocation, the highest number should be programs. And in this example, 88% of expenses are driven by programs, which is great when an external donor is looking at organizations to contribute or donate to. Lastly, we have programming, general and administrative expenses, and salary and benefits. And we're comparing those expenses to the annual budget. We want to see here if we are going over or do we need to scale back. In the salary and benefits, we have not exceeded our annual budget yet, which is a great thing at this point in time because the report says for the 10 months ended. We are trending very well with the salaries. We have not, what it's saying is that we have not lost employees, but we have not gained a significant amount of employees as well. So these are great Excel financial dashboards to tell your story. Next is another dashboard that was created in Excel. Here we're doing some liquidity with the current ratio. We're doing the number of months, cash on hand. We're doing the year-to-date budget to actuals and the cash balance to help us make executive decisions and be able to forecast any items that might arise in the future and gain control over it right now. And underneath each chart, we're given a brief explanation of what's going on with each chart. New and developing technologies are making dynamic reporting an obtainable option today. This is an example of Power BI. It's convenient and provides easy access to information needed to make decisions. Leadership decides what information is most valuable and necessary to aid daily decision making. If you attended our Dashboard Nirvana webinar, you saw how powerful a tool it is. You can access it from a computer or mobile device like a tablet or a cell phone. In this example, as we see, it's very dynamic in its reporting. It tells us about our revenue in real time. We're able to see how we're able to drill down into different categories. And it is an exciting piece of technology to use in your board meetings. The underlying data for all of these charts and graphs are coming right from the general ledger accounting software, either via a direct connections or by exporting reports. We are looking at a profit and loss and have the ability to drill down, as I said before, to specific revenue and expense lines. We can see how actuals compare to budget and prior year. This is a great tool to wow your board. Another key piece of technology that is emerging in the world is same tool, Power BI, but now we're using it on our mobile devices. With this, we're able to see our balance sheet. We still have the ability to drill down. We get to see how things are trending. If we need to make quick and decisive decisions right away. And as you see, it's very dynamic. Look, it's even able to make annotations in the software. So this is a wonderful tool, which is called Microsoft Power BI. It is time for another poll now. How soon do you receive your financial reports after month end? Do you receive it within 15 days of month end? Within 30 days of month end? Within 45 days of month end? Or, I hate to mention this, you're still waiting for financial reports. It looks like we have 54% of attendees that receive their financial month-end reports within 15 days. That is wonderful news. We have 31% that says within 30 days of month end, and we have 15%. I'm still waiting for financial reports. If you're still waiting for financial reports, I think I have some contact information for you at the end of this presentation. Keep in mind overall that effectiveness of financial information has on decision making diminishes over time. Stale information is usually not useful and therefore provides less value. Back to Nicole now to discuss best practices for presenting financial information.
There are two attributes that are needed for effective reporting, which are timeliness and accuracy. It is recommended monthly reports are delivered within 2 weeks after the month end. However, the reports will not mean anything if they're not accurate. Reports have to be easy to understand and should be compiled with the audience in mind. As discussed earlier, comparative information provides a benchmark and a reference on performance. Different levels of detail are needed for different readers. For example, an executive director may need detailed information, but the board may only need to see it in a more summarized format. An organization should be able to report financial information by program, department, cost center, and even funder. In this example, it is a budget to actual report intended for a program director. This information would be coming right out of the general ledger accounting software. In the first column, you can see the year-to-date actuals, and then it adds in the forecast for the remaining months to come up with an estimated revenue and expenses for the year. The program director can easily see how this compares to the budget that he had for the year. This will allow them to make their own assumptions about if they're in alignment with grant budgeting or if they need to cut back on costs. We know that information presented must help board members and executive management understand and interpret financial results by explaining budget variances, analyzing program performance, and summarizing results. However, the most important part is communicating the financial information is educating the board members and executive management on nonprofit accounting issues. As accountants, it's part of our job to educate and explain what is being presented on the financials and the difference between nonprofit accounting and for-profit accounting. For most part, they're very similar. However, one of the key exceptions is the accounting for contributions. In this example, we have the revenue section of a statement of activities, also known as the income statement. By using a columnar approach, the report provides information on whether donor-imposed restrictions are being met. In this section here, nonprofits must distinguish between contributions received with donor restrictions and those received without donor restrictions. Expirations of donor-imposed restrictions are reported as a separate line on the income statement. If little is ever reported on this line, that's a sign that donor-imposed restrictions are not being met. Donor-imposed restrictions can be temporary or permanent in nature. Some examples of donor-imposed restrictions that are temporary are gifts restricted for specific programs or to acquire buildings or equipment, gifts to be used after a specified date, or pledges payable in the future. For example, you receive a grant that is covering 2 years. A donor-imposed restriction that is permanent in nature are such as permanent endowment funds or perpetual trusts.
Nicole, did we meet our 2 learning objectives during this webinar today?
Genevieve, I believe we did. We went through the key pieces of financial information. We talked through why cash is king or queen. We talked through how comparative information is important to make decision-making and telling the financial story. We also went through some best practices for presenting this information, whether it's in an executive summary, a memo, some dashboards, or dynamic reporting.
It sounds like to me, Nicole, we have met our 2 objectives today.
Yes.
For more information, for more resources on today's programming, we have provided in your package today links to Form 990 Finder from GuideStar, the governance policy examples, including donor privacy and gift acceptance, that can be found on the Charity Navigator's website, and gift acceptance policy examples, and some other examples from the National Council of Nonprofits. We thank you for joining us today, and now we will take questions from the audience.
Ellie, do we have any questions from the audience?
So we actually don't have any questions yet. So if there's any out there, would love to get them in. Earlier, Isaiah asked about the software that you were talking about with the dynamic reporting, which you then later said, and I also posted, it's a Power BI. And maybe I'll just add that it can connect very easily, particularly to QuickBooks, if that's a financial system that your organization uses. All right, and then I see a couple of others here. What's included in a typical month-end financial reporting package?
So a typical month-end financial reporting package should have the memo, that executive summary that we spoke about at the front, and then supported by statements, usually your statement of activities or your balance sheet. Your statement of financial position or your balance sheet, your statement of activities, which is also known as your income statement or P&L, a cash flow statement, and the rolling forecast. I feel like those should be your 4 or 5 key pieces. But you can also have supplemental reports that maybe help dig into other areas. Like if you wanted to, for example, if you're going through a gala right now and you wanted reporting on a gala, you can also include that in your month-end memo and reporting.
Thank you, Nicole. Isaiah has another question here. Do you provide support to our business office? And I'm going to maybe interpret that a little bit here, and of course he can also add to it. But yes, your part-time controller provides support in the accounting and financial management functions for nonprofit organizations. So hopefully that answers your question. But please, if you have any more, you can contact us. So Genevieve, Nicole, any wrap-ups here?
No, so on the slide here, we have our contact info. So if you ever have any questions, please do not hesitate to reach out. Thank you so much for joining us today. It was a pleasure to have everybody here.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
And Tommy D, you want to wrap us up here?
Well, yeah, I'll tell you, as a board member, this was incredibly informative and at the same time makes me concerned to make sure things are in order. So I'm very appreciative. Really super job, informative, and thank you both ladies for sharing your expertise and knowledge in these areas. I also like to thank, Ellie on the team and the rest of the team of YPTC for your support of the Nonprofit Resource Hub, as well as your support of what we do here with the sector in general, specifically the hub, but then also all the organizations you work with. So thank you for that. Thanks for your partnership. For those of you who might not know who I am, I'm Tommy DeMisa of the Vanguard Insurance Agency, the Director of Strategic Alliances for the agency. We're an employee benefits firm and one of the founding members of the Nonprofit Resource Hub. So thanks for being here with us today. I'm also the host of a weekly radio podcast called Philanthropy in Focus, where I interview executive leaders of nonprofit organizations each week to help them amplify their message. I'm very passionate about this sector, and I like telling stories on behalf of the sector. What I'd like to do now is just thank you for attending our webinar today and remind you that we will be sending out a survey. I know sometimes surveys can be tedious, but it really helps us out if you fill out that survey and get the information back to us so we know what we're doing right, as well as some areas of opportunity that we may improve on for you and others in the sector. Upcoming events, we have April 26th, we have a nonprofit meet and greet, and that basically is a meeting here on Zoom where we will have multiple breakout rooms led by some of the founders and some of the associate members of the Nonprofit Resource Hub. And we look forward to that opportunity to have you come together and collaborate. It's always a lot of fun because people get to learn about the other organizations, and there's always those opportunities to say, wow, we can make a connection here. We might be able to help each other out. That's always exciting for me. I call myself the nonprofit sector connector. So you would imagine connecting is it's rather important to me. So the meet and greet, when is the meet and greet? April 26th from 4:30 to 6 o'clock p.m. Eastern time. And that you can, I'm doing this off my phone, so I missed you. I might've been Alicia that asked me that question. I apologize if I got it wrong, but I see Kelly hooking me up and putting the information in the chat box. So you'll be able to do that there. If for some reason you're not yet a nonprofit member of the Nonprofit Resource Hub, by all means, you can go right to the website, nonprofitresourcehub.org, and get all that information. If you have any questions, you can reach out to my buddy, my friend, Danette O'Connell at DOconnell. So that's DOCONNELL at nonprofitresourcehub.org. And I see Kelly putting the information in the chat again. So thank you. If you have any questions, you can reach out to Danette, and obviously there's tons of resources on the website. Thanks for investing this time with us today. And thanks again to YPTC for a great presentation. Have a great day, everybody. Bye now.